Welcome back to Guided Country Tours. Australia is the land of stunning beaches, vibrant cities, and a shockingly high cost of living. Yeah, you heard that right. If you're dreaming of moving down under, you better be prepared to shell out some serious cash. We're talking about rent prices that would make your jaw drop, grocery bills that could rival a small mortgage payment, and transportation costs that'll have you thinking twice about that morning latte. From Sydney to Melbourne to Brisbane, we're breaking down the numbers, city by city, so you can see exactly where your hard-earned money would be going. We'll cover everything from rent and housing to groceries, transportation, utilities, and even healthcare. So, buckle up, grab your budget planner, and let's get right into it. Alright guys, let's start with the big one, housing. If you're moving to Australia, especially a major city like Sydney or Melbourne, be prepared to experience some serious sticker shock when it comes to rent. I'm talking prices that'll make you question if you accidentally wandered into a luxury penthouse instead of a one-bedroom apartment. Think about this. In Sydney, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in the city centre is a mind-blowing 3,500 Australian dollars per month. That's over 2,300 US dollars. And before you think, oh, I'll just live outside the city, let me stop you right there. Even in the suburbs, you're still looking at an average of 2,800 Australian dollars, or about 1,800 US dollars per month. And it's not just Sydney. Melbourne is right up there with similarly high rent prices. We're talking about a highly competitive rental market where finding a decent place at a reasonable price can feel like winning the lottery. And forget about buying a place, especially in those desirable city centers. The Australian property market is notoriously expensive, with median house prices reaching astronomical levels. So, what does this mean for you? Well, if you're set on living in Australia, you need to be prepared to allocate a significant chunk of your income towards housing. I'm talking about potentially 50% or more of your take-home pay, depending on your lifestyle and where you choose to live. The truth is, these high housing costs can put a real strain on your budget, especially if you're not earning a high income. It can also limit your options, forcing you to make sacrifices in other areas of your life, like travel, entertainment, or even saving for the future. Figure out how much you can realistically afford to spend on rent without putting yourself in a difficult financial situation. Trust me, it's better to be prepared and go in with your eyes wide open than to be caught off guard by the high cost of living in Australia. Alright, let's talk about another essential part of life: food. Now, I love a good avocado toast as much as the next person, but in Australia, be prepared to pay a premium for those brunch staples. Groceries in Australia are notoriously expensive, and I'm not just talking about imported delicacies. We're talking about basic necessities like bread, milk, eggs, and produce that can cost significantly more than what you might be used to paying back home. Think about this. A loaf of bread can easily set you back 4 to 5 Australian dollars, a gallon of milk around 6 Australian dollars, and don't even get me started on the price of cheese. First, Australia is a large island nation, which means that a lot of produce has to be transported long distances, adding to the cost. Second, factors like weather patterns and droughts can impact agricultural production, leading to price fluctuations. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but I'll just eat out less and cook more at home. Even a casual meal at a mid-range restaurant can easily cost you 25 to 30 Australian dollars per person, and that's before you factor in drinks or dessert. But the bottom line is, food is a significant expense in Australia, so be prepared to budget accordingly. And hey, maybe those cooking skills will come in handy after all. Okay, so you found a place to live, you're stocked up on groceries. Now it's time to talk about getting around. Australia has a decent public transportation system, especially in major cities like Sydney and Melbourne, but it's not exactly cheap. A single one-way ticket on the train or bus can cost you around $4 to $5 AUD, depending on the distance traveled. If you're commuting daily, those costs can add up quickly. Of course, you can purchase weekly or monthly passes for a discounted rate, but even those can put a dent in your budget. Now you might be thinking, okay, I'll just buy a car. But hold on a second. Car ownership in Australia comes with its own set of expenses. First, there's the initial cost of purchasing a car, which can be quite high, especially if you're looking for something reliable. Then there's insurance, registration, maintenance, and of course petrol, which is notoriously expensive in Australia. In fact, petrol prices have been known to fluctuate wildly, sometimes reaching over $2 AUD per liter. Now, if you're living in a major city like Sydney or Melbourne, you might be able to get away with relying solely on public transportation or even walking and cycling, but if you're in a more spread out city or plan on exploring the vast Australian outback, having a car can be a necessity. My advice? Factor in transportation costs when deciding where to live and work. Alright, so we've covered rent, food, and transportation. Now let's talk about those essential utilities that keep your home running smoothly, because guess what? They're not cheap either. In fact, Australia is known for having some of the highest electricity prices in the world. Factors like the country's reliance on coal-fired power plants and the increasing demand for electricity have all contributed to these high prices. So, what does this mean for your wallet? Well, be prepared to see a significant chunk of your income go towards electricity bills, especially during those scorching summer months when you're cranking up the air conditioning. We're talking about potentially hundreds of dollars per month, depending on your energy consumption and the size of your home. And it's not just electricity. Water bills can also be quite high, especially in urban areas where water restrictions are common. Now let's talk about internet. Internet plans in Australia can be quite expensive compared to other developed countries, and the speeds aren't always as fast as you might hope for. And as for the internet, shop around for the best deals and consider your usage needs before committing to a plan. Let's talk about healthcare in Australia. The good news is that Australia has a universal healthcare system called Medicare, which provides affordable access to essential medical services for citizens and permanent residents. This means that if you're living and working in Australia long-term, you'll have access to subsidized doctor's visits, hospital stays, and even some prescription medications. However, if you're moving to Australia on a temporary visa, you'll likely need to obtain private health insurance. This is because Medicare doesn't typically cover visitors, and medical expenses can add up quickly if you're not insured. Private health insurance in Australia can be quite expensive, depending on your age, health status, and the level of coverage you choose. It's essential to factor in the cost of private health insurance when calculating your overall living expenses in Australia. While Medicare does subsidize the cost of many essential medications for citizens and permanent residents, some medications can still be quite expensive, even with the subsidy. If you take regular medication, do your research and factor in the cost of your prescriptions when budgeting for your move to Australia. Being informed about healthcare costs and options can save you a lot of stress and money in the long run. So, there you have it, the shocking truth about the cost of living in Australia in 2025. From sky-high rent prices to expensive groceries and utilities, living in the land down under can definitely put a strain on your budget, but that doesn't mean it's not worth it. If you're earning a good income, are prepared to budget carefully, and prioritize experiences over material possessions, then Australia could be the perfect place for you. Because trust me, the last thing you want is to be stuck in paradise with an empty wallet.